Nissan has been making electric cars now for more than a decade. Its very first electric car, the 2011 Nissan LEAF, as debuted in 2010, not only was the world's best-selling electric car for many years, but it was also one of the most affordable, mass-produced, fast charging capable electric cars you could buy. Although the LEAF is still being produced today, there's this as well, the Nissan Ariya. It's an SUV which has been on the market now for the better part of a year, but only as a front-wheel drive variant. I'm here today in Central California, in wine country, to test out the all-wheel drive Nissan Ariya instead. It's got more power, it's got a beefy battery pack, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's check it out. So I have a confession to make. When Nissan unveiled the Ariya, I wasn't all that taken by the vehicle's design. I didn't actually like it all that much. I thought it was a bit weird, and not the same kind of nerdy weird that the Nissan LEAF originally was. This was mainstream market, let's appeal to as many people as possible weird. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. It felt large. It certainly looked large. It felt a little ostentatious, a little over the top. But I'm here today to tell you that so far that has not been the feeling that I have gained driving this car. This is Nissan's all-wheel drive variant of the Ariya SUV. It's actually the top spec Platinum Plus trim, which retails from $61,000 or just under. If you want an entry-level Nissan Ariya with a standard range battery pack and front-wheel drive, you can get one for about $44,000 US. In terms of cross-shopping, then this cross-shops against the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Volkswagen ID.4, the Kia EV6, and the Hyundai Ioniq 5. That gives you a really good kind of idea of who will be buying this car. Think family car for people who are on a decent enough salary to be able to afford the not insignificant price tag, especially if you go for the high-end Platinum Plus trim variant. Inside of this car, you get this lovely serenity that comes from being in a very open plan, open feel vehicle. Nissan is very proud of the fact that the center armrest here, the center console, can be moved backwards and forwards. There are two buttons here by the driver, and you can actually move them forwards and backwards while you're driving, which opens up this space between the driver and the front seat passenger and gives you that very open, airy feel that I really like to see in an electric vehicle. You can obviously slide it back if you want to have an easier access to your cups. And then you've also got a little cubby hole here under the armrest with an inductive wireless Qi charger for your mobile phone if your phone has that equipped. Underneath the deck, as I will call it, there is a USB socket or two that allows you to charge mobile devices, as well as a very nifty integrated cable management system, so you don't have cables faffing around and being a danger to the driver on the floor. And I think that shows the kind of care that Nissan has put into this vehicle, because it shows that rather than just put things where there's a space, Nissan's also gone through the purpose of going, okay, how is this going to be used? Who is going to use it? And that's something that Nissan really worked hard to reiterate this morning in our press briefing, telling us that they've put a lot of work into figuring out who the ideal owner is for this, how this car will be used. They've used lots of focus groups and lots of feedback from both existing LEAF owners and also non-EV owners as to what they want in a family SUV. Because the Ariya was designed from the get-go as an electric vehicle, there's a flat floor in the cabin, there's no nasty transmission tunnels, and the motor and the battery pack are all kept nice and low, which obviously improves your handling and just the general driving feel. It also means you've got that extra space within the cabin. This feels a whole class bigger inside than it actually is. And then you've also got a really large practical rear load bay space. There is no front trunk, I'll come to that in a minute, but you do have 59.7 cubic feet in the back there for your luggage, which is about 1,650 litres, give or take. Nissan decided not to put a front trunk in this vehicle, instead opting to push a lot of the stuff that would normally sit in this area in the car underneath the hood. Moving all that stuff up front also means you can free open this space. I've already shown you this console that moves backwards and forwards, but what I haven't shown you is the coffee table. I hit the button down here and there's a coffee table that pops up that's designed to, help you hold a laptop when you're charging, or maybe put a beverage, or maybe a little picnic box there just so that you can eat something while you wait for your car to charge. It's not a full work surface that you find in some vehicles, but I think it's very good. It's got a nice little tray here for you to store things in, and you just press this button and off it pops and it disappears again. Let's talk about the haptic feedback and the touch control surfaces in this vehicle. I've gone on the record plenty in the past to say that I do not like capacitive buttons. I prefer good old-fashioned tactile switches. They're easy to find with your hand, they're easy to press, and there's no accidental brushing of them. However, to make these capacitive buttons easier to use, Nissan has added a feedback function, effectively a haptic click, a bit like what you'd get on a mobile phone to let you know, you just touched that button, I felt you touch that button, and I'm going to give you the feedback to say that, yep, I will do what you've asked me to do. In terms of layout for the cabin, I'm very impressed with how everything is laid out. I can reach all of the controls, and you've got these lovely dual 12-inch LCD displays in front of you. This one here is concave, and this one here is convex. The reason we have a convex and concave screen setup is so that the dashboard is easier to read even in direct sunlight, and the touchscreen portion of the car is easier to control both for the driver and the front seat passenger. Nissan has got a new touchscreen interface compared to the old one found in Nissan LEAF, and it's very easy to use and is based around the concept of having apps for your vehicle. You can download apps, but you also have access to your mobile phone if you have wireless CarPlay or wireless Android Auto. I've got mine set up right now with wireless CarPlay, and it's very seamless and very easy to use. There's also the OK Nissan functionality, or OK Alexa functionality, that uses that system's AI assistant so that you can interact with the car using your voice. However, earlier on today, I did try getting this car to change the temperature using my normal speaking voice, the one you're hearing now, and the car was getting very confused, thought I was trying to set a new destination rather than ask it to change the temperature. As soon as I put on my faux American accent, it kicked in. And sometimes voice recognition gets a little bit too eager and interrupts you while you're filming the car review because it wants to help you out. So it's not the most seamless and innovative voice assistant I've seen. I think I prefer Volkswagen's system, but it's still half decent and half competent. And if it helps you focus on driving, I'm all for it. Talking about that, let's talk about Nissan's ProPilot version 2.0. You activate it using this button here, the blue icon on the display. It gives you a special dashboard representation of what's going on in the car, and then it looks a little bit like Tesla's autopilot. It shows the car front and center. You set the speed, and then the car takes over with a radar assisted cruise control. Now right now I am in kind of the second of the 3 different settings that you can use for this system. This one, it has a green steering wheel. It means that I have to keep my hands on the wheel at all times, but hopefully in a little while the system will turn to a blue steering wheel, and I will be able to take my hands off of the steering wheel and just supervise it as I would with Blue Cruise or Super Cruise. Let's increase our speed here. I have a head-up dash in front of me. The head-up display is very clear. I've actually tweaked it so it's a little bit brighter than it normally would be, but it shows me everything I need to know. It shows me how fast I'm going, what the speed limit is on the road I'm on, and it tells me what else is going on. Now that little chime you heard there was the ProPilot system deactivating as we went past that off-ramp. It's now reactivated. Interestingly, it's now also telling me that there is a merging vehicle and I should be aware of that. That was a very nice thing. It told me to be aware of merging vehicles, and it gave me an audible chime as well. A few moments ago, the system went from the green steering wheel to the blue steering wheel, which now means that I can drive with hands off. Nissan calls this hands off, eyes on. And I think that's a really nice way of reminding you that even if the car is doing the majority of the steering, you should be paying attention to the road. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. The car is using a vision-based system to make sure it can see the road ahead. It is detecting cars as they pull in or overtake me, both on my side and in front of me. And it doesn't operate in some modes. If you turn on the snow mode, which I will come to in a minute, this system will not operate. Additionally, Nissan told me earlier today, if you have the windshield wiper on at its highest setting, it will automatically disengage the ProPilot 2.0 and ask you to take over control. That is because this system relies on cameras that are embedded just up here to see the road ahead, and while it is backed up by radar for the adaptive cruise control, Nissan wants to make sure that you are in control when the weather is inclement. I would love at some point in the future to test out just what the limits of this system are, but right now, here traveling north on 101, it seems to be doing a very good job. So I just witnessed ProPilot do exactly the same thing that Ford's Blue Cruise system does when it comes across California's double speed limit signs. For those who don't know, in the state of California, there's 2 different speed limits often on freeways. You have one for cars, which right now is 65 miles per hour, and then you have one for vehicles with a certain number of axles or more. Normally it's 3 or 4 axles, or vehicles who are towing, and it's 55 for that. And when we went past the sign, the Nissan Ariya went, oh, the speed limit's 55. It's not 55, it's 65. But because the 55 limit for trucks is posted after the 65 limit, the car got very confused. The other thing worth noting here about ProPilot 2.0 is it has a lane change functionality. You just tap the indicator stalk and the car will automatically go over for you. It does want you to hold the steering wheel while it executes that lane change. Supposedly it will automatically do it if it comes across a car that's traveling slower than you, but I haven't yet come across somebody who's traveling slower than me. I'm kind of the slowest thing on the road right now, and I'm traveling at the posted speed limit. it's California. What can you say? With the car doing most of the hard work, let's talk about the battery pack and the drivetrain here on the Ariya all-wheel drive. As you probably already know, the standard Nissan Ariya, that's the front-wheel drive variant, has about 238 horsepower, that's 175 kilowatts, and 221 pound-feet of torque, which is about 300 newton meters. For the all-wheel drive variant, the powertrain gets boosted to 389 horsepower, which is 285 kilowatts, and you get double the torque. That's 442 pound-feet or 600 newton meters. This is a lot quicker to 60 miles per hour. The front-wheel drive is no slouch. It takes 7.2 seconds. This one takes closer to just under 5 seconds. You really feel it when you punch the go pedal, although unlike a lot of electric cars out there that like to plant you back in your seat, the power delivery of the Nissan Ariya all-wheel drive is much more measured and much more civilized, and I think that befits the car's interior that I'll come to in a second. The battery choices for this car are the same as you would get for the front-wheel drive Ariya. That is effectively about 63 to 65 kilowatt hours on the standard range and about 87, 90 kilowatt hours on the extended range. On paper, you should be able to easily achieve somewhere between 260 and maybe 300 miles. I think Nissan earlier today said, 270 should be achievable. I know that you can get 300 on the front-wheel drive if you drive it carefully, and as a comparison today, I've got 56% state of charge, and the car says I have 166 miles of range remaining. That looks pretty much like 300 miles of practical real-world range to me. In terms of charging, you can charge this car up using a CCS charging station at up to 130 kilowatts. That means it's not the fastest charging SUV on the market. If you want that, you're going to be better off with, say, the EV6 or the Ioniq 5, or maybe the Mustang Mach-E. Obviously, there is also the BMW iX, which does charge a little bit faster too. But given that this car has a smaller battery pack than, say, the extended range Mustang Mach-E, I think that 130 kilowatts of charging is not too bad. Importantly, this battery in this car is not like the battery found in the Nissan LEAF. It is not forced air cooled, it is liquid cooled, and that is very important. While it's very nice to have the car do all of the hard work of driving for you with ProPilot 2.0, it doesn't give you a very good impression of what it's really like to drive this car on a daily basis. So I've actually come off the freeway and I'm going to go through some smaller country roads to get back to my hotel, so I can actually give you some feedback of how this car drives. With the all-wheel drivetrain, this car is extremely sure-footed and I don't have any problems winding it around this road. With the lane keep assist and everything else active, if you are on a narrow road and you don't absolutely get the car perfectly between the line, the car will get angry with you and it will beep at you and tell you off for going over the yellow line. And while that is on paper a good thing, if you're driving on a small country road or you have to overtake someone like a pedestrian or a cyclist, it can be a little annoying to have the car constantly beeping at you. It's not doing it right now though, so I'm just happily going to carry on driving. Now I'm off the freeway, let's talk about the various driving modes that are available. You have your standard mode, which is the one I'm in now. It's the one that you're probably going to want to use on a daily basis. It's responsive enough to get you out of trouble, and if you push your foot to the floor, it does give you all that torque that the motors can provide, but it's a nice soft throttle response. It's not too harsh, and the steering response is generally pretty good. It seems to be adaptive, so it changes based on the speed you're driving at. As you slow down, the steering becomes a little bit lighter, which helps with maneuverability in parking lots. You then have your sport mode, which firms up the steering feel quite substantially and also gives you a much more eager to perform response from the throttle. Then you have, after that, the eco mode. Obviously, eco mode is designed to be the most efficient of all of the modes. And if you are on a long distance trip or you're wanting to maximize your energy savings, that is the one you are going to want to use. To be fair though, I have had this car in standard mode all day and I've still managed about 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour, which isn't bad for a vehicle of this size and shape, and the fact that it's got an all-wheel drivetrain. Certainly not as efficient as the original Nissan LEAF, but then this is a much bigger, heavier and meatier car in terms of its driving dynamics and its throttle response. So in addition to your standard, your eco and your sport mode, for the all-wheel drive variant of the Ariya, you also get a snow mode. Snow mode designed to give you extra traction to help you get out of a sticky situation if you happen to be in one when it's bad weather. I haven't obviously had a chance to try out the snow mode because it's well above freezing and I can't see any snow anywhere. Sorry. In addition to those 4 modes, you also have the E-step, which is the evolution of the e-pedal driving that you would find in the Nissan LEAF. And you also have a toggle between D and B. B, of course, adding faux engine braking. It's not single pedal driving, however. You cannot come to a complete standstill using the B and E-step together, but if I lift my foot off the throttle right now, you'll notice that the car is slowing down nicely, and then it kind of gets to about 10 miles an hour and then just creeps. You're expected to use the brake pedal to stop the car beyond that. On these lovely twisty roads, the car is very sure-footed. I do get a lot more feedback from the steering wheel in standard mode than I do in eco, and I should have mentioned you switch between them using a drive mode touch button here with, again, haptic feedback. So I just press it and it will allow me to switch between sport, standard, eco and snow. Now in eco, the throttle response, you really have to push the throttle quite hard to get any meaningful progression. It would probably be pretty good for traffic in town. If you're stuck in traffic, put it in eco mode because it means you're less likely to push the throttle too hard and ram into someone. But if I switch into sport mode, which I'm going to now, and I put my foot down, you get a faux engine noise and the car responds very enthusiastically. I think it's very interesting that Nissan has decided to use this kind of ooh choir thing going on when you are in sport mode, but when you're driving it in all the other drive modes, it's a very serene experience, which is amplified, by the way, by the fact that this car has acoustic glass all round, and so it's a very quiet and calming interior to be in. Let's talk about that interior. When I got behind the wheel of this car, I did a double take, and that's because it reminds me very much of the interior of the BMW iX. It's not quite as ostentatious as the BMW iX. In fact, it's not ostentatious at all. It's very down to earth, but it does use some of that same design language and material accents. You've got this faux suede here on the door, and that goes all the way across the dash, and it's almost that same blue that you've seen in BMWs in the past. You've also got this lovely wooden panel here, at least I think it's a wood veneer of some description, and it's quite upmarket in its feel, but it's not so upmarket that you would worry about bringing your family into this car, and I think that's the difference. The iX feels so high-end, so upper class, that I would worry about putting children in it lest they damage the car. This feels like it's a little bit more hard-wearing and a little bit more robust. I would be interested if you own an Ariya to know if that is the case or not. There's also kind of that quasi angular design philosophy that you see in the iX as well. You've got some geometric patterns through here that remind me a little bit of those found in the iX, although they're not the same. It's just evocative. These two cars have had the same kind of design both internally and to some extent externally as well. Sadly, my time with the Nissan Ariya all-wheel drive Premium Plus is coming to an end, but I do want to mention a couple of things before I close out. First, in this trim variant, the rear seat passengers get USB sockets as standard. That's very important if you've got kids and you want to do a long distance trip and they want to keep themselves occupied with electronic doodads while you're on the road. Second, the head-up display, I mentioned it earlier, but it is very clear and very easy to see, and everything is exactly where I want it to be in the road. It's not too cluttered, unlike some head-up systems. When you are in ProPilot, it gives you extra information. When you're just driving normally, as I am now, it takes that away, so it's not cluttering up your view with information you don't need. Next, the vents on this. They are normal adjustable vents. There's none of this, we know best, we're going to tell you how your car should have its HVAC system operate. No, if I want the air to direct on my face, I can just move this little toggle here and the air ends up on my face. It's brilliant. More car companies need to keep manual HVAC controls like this because it's so much easier to use and there's less to go wrong. The final thing I want to give a shout out to is the central rear view mirror, which operates both as a standard optical rear view mirror, but also if you flip what appears to be an old-fashioned dimming switch. Do you remember those? You only had to, flip it down if someone was behind you so they didn't blind you with their brights. It turns into a camera. Unlike, say, the Chevrolet Bolt EV's camera, which I always found a little bit unpleasant to use, this camera is very clear and very easy to see. I haven't used it at night, so I can't tell you if it is very good at nighttime, but it does get washed. If you use the rear wash wipe function, and yes, this car has a rear wiper so you can see out the back. Good job, Nissan. You wouldn't believe how many car companies are no longer doing that. You also get your camera cleaned, and I think that's pretty good all round. So there you have it. What a car. It offers a lot of the feel that I have experienced in far more expensive vehicles with Nissan's long-standing heritage. I came into this not expecting to like the Ariya. I came into this worried about Nissan's change of direction, about the fact that Nissan had taken what was a very affordable car and still is in the Nissan LEAF and decided to make a much more expensive, higher market vehicle in the Ariya. And yes, it's another blinking SUV, but you know what? It's a very well executed car. The thing I think that it's difficult to express here is how maneuverable this car is despite its size. It's got a very good turning circle. It feels much larger than it actually behaves on the road. It's got a cavernous luggage space in the rear, and yes, there's no front trunk, but when you've got such a practical rear load bay, you don't need a front trunk. The cabin itself, everything is pushed up under the hood, so you've got this really open space. You can adjust the center console fore and back, and while I'm not necessarily sold on the whole coffee table thing, it's actually a nice interior to be in. The other point that I should make here is that a lot of the material choices that Nissan used in this car feel much more premium than I thought they would be. If you are in the market for a family-friendly, all-electric, all-wheel drive crossover, I think this is probably one of my more favorites in an increasingly crowded and confusing market. Thank you to Nissan for inviting us here to beautiful wine country in Central California. It has been a really lovely trip, great company, and this has been the first time that I've been on an all-female press drive event, and it was actually really nice. Kudos to Nissan for arranging that, because it really made the whole trip feel very different, and it's a very enjoyable car. That's it, we are done with today's video, and if you liked it, you know what to do. Feel free to let us know your thoughts in the Discord chat room by reaching out to us on Mastodon, or if you are a Patreon supporter of this channel already, leaving a comment over on our Patreon page. If you want more, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the links to regularly support us with a YouTube membership or, in fact, a Patreon subscription. You'll also find links in the Downy bit below to Ko-fi, Bitcoin, and our swag store, as well as that aforementioned Mastodon server. Scrolling on my right is the list of amazing charged up supporters, and shout-outs go out to our self-driving tier supporters. They are, of course, Mike Weeder, Denny Hyde, Linda Irish, Alange Schlal, Mark Eggleton, Cyprien Laplace, John Trammell, Alan Topper, Chris Maxwell, Brian Newton, Bennett Elder, Andrew Martin, Sean Tucker, Pedro Mura Pinheiro, Carl Hodgson, Tony Moss, Brophy Wolf, Kyle Fox, Hey Esker, Tesla in the Gong, Dan Blair, Peter Dillinger, Gordon C., Stefan Fembren, Stephen Williams, Regine Fellows, Chris Asental, and Jim Burness. And finally, out of this world thanks to our top tier supporters: John L. Henderson, Clay Witt, CPU Freak 101, John Lyons, Kevin Burrowbridge, Andrew Glenn, Joe Hoos, Dave Kitchen, Joe Bresney, Nigel S., Matthew Drobnak, Eric Knack, Paul Conway, Stephen O'Donoghue, JP Fagerback, Reggie Watts, Marcel Ward, Robert Flannery, Aaron Hahn, Rory Litwin, Ellery Hensley, Will Graylian, and last but not least, Ian. Don't forget that we make videos every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, as well as Saturday over on the main channel, plus our chicken and garden and Sunday musings over on Take Two at the weekend. And with that, I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you soon, and as always, keep evolving.